Hi everybody, my name's Chris Brake. I'm the head of data products at Find My Past, and I'm here to talk to you about the 1921 census for England and Wales and our experience in building the online product experience for that census, which launched last week, a few days ago, on January the 6th. There are a few really big product challenges in terms of building the online product experience. The biggest were the security constraints on the data. These are incredibly strict, incredibly tight. Any staff who actually could see the data had to have one of the highest level security clearances you can get from the UK government, and most staff couldn't look at it at all. And when we did the work and got the digitisation and the transcription, it had to be locked away in a digital vault. It was only unlocked less than 3 months before the launch in October. So we had a very, very limited time window to work with the actual real data before we launched the product. And it was still very secure during that time. And we knew that on day one, there would be a huge demand for this data, many times a typical peak daily load. So we had to build all of the product within these constraints. And so we just set out a few key principles to try and deal with this. The first one was really clear from research and past experiences. We needed to let the data deliver the value, not fancy features that could get in the way. Let the data deliver the value for our customers. All of our product features, we decided we were going to build for all of our records, not just 1921. That meant they were all running and working at scale before we launched the product on 1921. So all the new features we were building were going to go live a long time in advance of launch. So nothing was going live for the first time on launch day. And in the run up to this, we did lots and lots of scaling, preparation and testing to make sure all of our platforms and systems were ready for the huge volume of traffic that hit us pretty much immediately at midnight on launch day on the 6th of January. This work has taken place over about the last 18 months, involving engineers and product managers across the company in creating all this ready for launch day. To do all this, there are a number of projects, but these were the major ones for us. There was a landing page and quick search box, a lot of work on the image viewer, a lot of work completely redesigning the transcript view, rebuilding our address search capability, implementing a new shared entity feature, what you see is powering the same employer search, and also implementing a whole new pay-per-view mechanism, billing platform, and preview hover capability. Let's start with the landing page. The objective here was to present someone with a really clear and simple search to get to the data as quickly as possible. So a simple landing page with a key information that people will have, take them straight to the search results, as you see here. But equally, only one click away from the full advanced search capabilities covering all of the index fields in the 1921 data, of which there were a huge number. Well, this was relatively straightforward, but again, had to be ready to go live, bang, midnight, the start of the 6th of January. Huge amount of work that was done actually well over a year ago was on the image viewer. Now we, updated our image viewer and improved the whole capability about the smoothness of moving around the images and the panning and zooming into things, which is important. We also added a whole bunch of new functionality into here. The main areas to look at are all of these new control functionalities up here. And also this whole area down at the bottom here, called the film strip, with a whole bunch of capability in there. Starting with, the controls at the top. Rich capability now in terms of brightness, contrast, color inversion to see things in this kind of way, rotation, all the capabilities you'd expect in terms of adding to the tree, zoom with a very kind of deep zoom capability, so good for people with eyesight which isn't wonderful, going to get very close into the image. And we also added the capability to overlay the transcription details on the image should people want to see that. So you can, if you bought the transcription as well as the image, you can see all the detail overlaid as you mouse over the different lines on the image. Very positive reception to all of those from our customers. And we also added in the film strip capability. We put a few things in here. We wanted to have the thumbnails of the images. So the sequence of film strip you see underneath the image is exactly what you would see if you were sitting in the archive with the piece of the census in front of you, leafing through the forms. I've been lucky enough to do that during the digitisation process. And this is exactly what you see. You see the household table, which is the back of the form, and you turn it over, and you see the front of the form with the address, and you see form after form after form. And the sequence in the film strip is exactly that sequence you would see in that book. We used to go through it from cover to cover. And you can click on any of these images to go to the next image. So if you buy a longer form with, say, multiple household pages in it, you can click on to see any of them. We also wanted to add in a bunch of extra materials. There's some great stuff in here. You can obviously see the other side of the form. You've got the front cover of the piece, the bound volume. You've got all the census collector maps, which are lovely. And you've got the plans of division and notes, not for all the districts, but for most. It gives you the names of the streets, sometimes even the actual streets they walked. And there's lots of personal annotations on some of these, which is great. And we've got a link to all of the individual transcripts contained in the photo you see. All this has been very popular with our customers. The one thing that they did insist we do that was an early addition was this closed film strip. People broadly liked the film strip, but did ask that they could be able to turn it off. And so we listened to our customers and added that capability. Another core area for us was the transcript. And again, this is to make the data deliver the value to customers that they want, but also to add some context and interesting other information. But we start up, front and center, the top of every transcript, the person's name, and the key information is right there in front of people with the household members in a simple table with the key information: names, relationships, age, birthplace, occupation, employer. Simple table, all of the key headline information right there in front of people, with the ability to view the original record, the image, or add this straight to a tree if you want to merge the information straight in, or print it or copy it. Immediately underneath this is the full information. Now this is the full detailed information that we have created from transcribing the original images you see. A lot of rich information in here. Some of it's quite specialised by the time you get down to piece references and things for the very dedicated genealogist. But all the information is here should you want it. As well as that material, we wanted to add some context. So we've got a bunch of information you'll see. There's links to the occupational dictionary that classified all of the various occupations that people had. If you look at the image, you'll see some green ink that classifies them into codes. This is a dictionary that explains what each of those codes means in terms of the definition of the occupation. You'll also see some of these, what I class as shared entity links to people sharing the occupation or even sharing the employer in the local area. More on that a little bit later. And some basic local context, the map of the local area. This layer you see is the Ordnance Survey 1888-1913 survey series, which were the current Ordnance Survey maps at the time of the census in 1921. And those base maps we saw were drawn on these for the census enumerators. We have a gazetteer from the late 19th century that would have been relatively current still when the census was taken, to give you a feel for what the places were like, and some newspaper. So we made a selection of newspapers and newspaper articles from 1921 and serve some selection of those on the page as well. And a little summary infographic of society in 1921, some of the key demographic and occupation indicators and how the district you're looking at compares with the national average. This is just trying to bring that transcript a little bit to life and add a little bit of context around the person. Address search, we did put a lot of work into address search. Huge amount of that was into just cleaning up the addresses across all the censuses and make that more aligned. Because one thing we wanted to do was to try and provide the ability to search all of the UK, well, England and Wales censuses at the same time for addresses. So you can find one house present in multiple census horizons in one search, or at least one street in one search. And so we completely redesigned this experience and rebuilt it and cleaned up a lot of data to support it. You can now search for street names in a particular location. You can do that across all censuses in one go, or choose a particular census. You can also use our search radius feature to set the geographical scope around the location you're choosing, which enables you, hopefully, to find the streets you're interested in. And often, the same street will be listed 2 or 3 times. That's the nature of the census data structure sometimes. But each one of these, you can say, well, there's a lordship lane here in Camberwell in London with 160 households. You can click on that. You can see all the individual households with their address and follow through either to the image or the transcript for that address. This is very popular. Genealogists like to use it as an alternative way to find families. If they can't find them under their name, perhaps there's been a transcription error, they can look at the same address. And equally, lots and lots of people just like to look up the history of their house. And 1921, quite a lot of the houses that people are currently living in were built and available. And so lots of people will find their own house in the 1921 census and can see who was living there. We've also built what I classify as a shared entity search. Everybody lives their lives in a context. They belong to a number of organisations and groups of people around them. It could be a school, could be a church, could be an employer, could be an occupation. The concept here is to try and connect, not necessarily with named relatives and family, but with other people at the same time in the same place who shared one of these entities. The most core one here is people who worked at the same employer at the same time. But there's a similar concept for occupation as well. And so we created this employer link to find people who worked at the same employer, which is great and is an interesting way to cut into the data. Presented some massive data challenges because, as any of you who look at this data will start to see, it's very dirty. People named their employer all sorts of different things, and often they got it wrong. And this is a relatively good one, but you'll see what James Railton described as his employer was Pegraw Grocers, or Pegraw and Co. Grocers, was actually James Pegram and Co. Grocers. And even on a quick selection, we've got James Pegram, J. Pegram, Messrs. Pegram Limited, Pegram and Co. Grocers, any number of variants of a very simple name for a local grocer. When it gets to a big employer, my personal favourite is I look at, say, Harland and Wolff, who were a big shipyard at the time. As far as I can tell, around about 9,000 people or so in the UK census work for Harland and Wolff in 1921. Between those 9,000 people, they managed to find just over 5,000, just over 5,500 different ways of writing the name of Harland and Wolff, the shipyard. So that's 5,500 variants of a name in 9,000 occurrences. So it gives you some feeling for how complicated this was to do and how carefully we had to think about the fuzziness and the logic in trying to take what someone had put in one form and match it up with people we think are in the same employer elsewhere. Because of course there are hundreds of thousands of employers, so we can't clean up all this data. We have to let the index and the fuzzy logic in there do its job, and it does reasonably well. We think it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. To get into all of that, we needed a great new payment experience. Pay-per-view is the sensible way to bring this data to life. It pays for all the massive effort in digitising and transcribing this, and it allows anybody to come in and buy just an individual transcription or image, but we did want to make this as smooth as possible. So we implemented a whole new pay-per-view mechanic that provides a simple preview of what's in the information, a couple of extra names in the household, so you're pretty sure it's the right family you're looking at. Very simple payment draw, easy to collect either credit cards or PayPal details that are remembered. So it becomes, once you've entered your details, a simple one-click checkout to purchase something. You can't do it automatically, you always have to confirm. But it's one click beyond that, and it's a very smooth process aimed to make purchasing this content very easy for everybody. And then finally, the last mile. We got to decrypt this data in October was the first time we could take it out of the digital vault. So we had less than 3 months to get everything ready and clean it up and get all the features and things working on it before it went live. It still had to stay completely secure. So we had a big internal testing community running with this, testing it every day from the middle of November or so, including all over Christmas, testing this data, testing all the various routes into it. We had to issue all those people with real credit cards, company cards, so that they could pay to test the real route with real bank transactions. We had to make sure all of our systems were scaled and ready for the traffic that hit us at midnight on the 6th of January. And all of this had to be done with the data staying completely locked away, secure and confidential, and not a single person outside Find My Past could see any of this data. And then we had to switch it all on. And we were all gathered around in various Zoom calls from about 10:30 on the night of the launch, waiting for it to happen. The engineers were gathered together in a room, kind of carefully ready to launch. The whole procedure to switch on all the data took about 20 minutes to get ready, push everything live. And we were all just sitting there watching. The data went live, and suddenly all the social media feeds lit up, and we were, as a group of people, watching there, reading those, monitoring those for any feedback about things that weren't working. There were a few small snags in the first 20 minutes or so, but then it settled down. It was all working fine. Identified a couple of issues that needed some work, and some engineers then worked through the night so that by 7:30 in the morning for the big launch, everything was very smooth and seamless. Huge media coverage in the morning, huge traffic volumes hit us that day, and everything stood up and worked. Nothing fell over. There were no major problems. It was a huge success and made possible by all of the preparation and testing and readiness planning that we'd done. And of course, it's worth mentioning that all of the work I've just talked to you about happened during a pandemic. So all of this was done remotely by teams who virtually never met each other face to face for the entire process, bringing all this data to life. So I hope you've enjoyed that walk through the digital product end, bringing 1921 to life. I know there's lots of other material about the conservation and scanning work, which is also hugely interesting and impressive. But I hope you've enjoyed that walk through the digital and technology work that we did to create the product that hopefully many of you are able to use to look at the 1921 census. So thank you very much.